For years, at the very bottom of the label of Aquafina, you could find these weird words. Bottled at the source, BWS. At the source, okay, so probably some kind of underground spring or something, right? Not really. Most people would probably have no idea of what BWS means. Probably PepsiCo, the parent company of Aquafina, wanted it this way. From the look of the bottle with snow-capped mountains, it seems that the source of the water is some lovely, quiet stream or some pristine underground spring. This actually means public water supply. In other words, tap water. That's right, Aquafina simply sources its water from ordinary tap water, pumps it into bottles, and sells it at a cost hundreds of times higher. As the Seattle Times joked, it's aqua, but is it fina? After pressure from Corporate Accountability International, a consumer group, PepsiCo accepted to change the label to explicitly mention the origin of the water. The consumer group said PepsiCo was using misleading marketing practices to turn water from a natural resource into a pricey consumer item. Aquafina, though, is far from the only brand that engages into these types of practices. Dasani, a brand owned by Coca-Cola, and Pure Life, owned by Nestlé, are also treated to tap water. If you buy Dasani in Michigan, for instance, you are actually buying municipal water from Detroit in a nice plastic bottle. Yet, after receiving complaints, Coca-Cola showed no intentions of changing the label. We don't believe that consumers are confused about the source of Dasani water, said a Coca-Cola spokeswoman. In the US, there is no legal requirement to clearly indicate in the label the origin of the bottle, so Coca-Cola uses this legal void to their advantage. The example of Aquafina putting in the label images of mountains to perpetuate the misconception that the water comes from natural spring sources is just the tip of the iceberg. Everest sparkling drinking water comes from Latvia, for instance. Everest water, purely the best, comes from Corpus Christi, southeastern Texas. Mount Everest water comes from Melbourne, and Everest packaged drinking water comes from Bangladesh. Arctic is also a very popular name to use in bottled water. Arctic just sounds good. It suggests that the water comes from some pristine glacier far from the city, far from pollution. So companies use this to mislead the public. Arctic Falls water, for instance, comes from New Jersey. The brand Glacier Mountain sells you water from Logan, Ohio. An Arctic chiller, to put another example, is municipal tap water from Edmonton, Canada. At least this one is closer to the Arctic. But there are other ways in which bottled water can mislead you. Poland Spring historically came from the water source of Poland Spring in Maine. In 1992, Nestlé acquired Poland Spring. The company constantly advertised it as 100% pure spring water, so given the Poland Spring brand and backstory, one might assume that the water comes, in fact, from the water source in Poland Spring. But according to two lawsuits in 2003 and 2017, Poland Spring had engaged in false advertising. The claimants argued that the water didn't come from natural springs, but from heavily treated common groundwater. They also alleged that the original Poland Spring had dried up in 1967 due to over-extraction. While the Poland Spring label depicts pristine scenes of water flowing down a hillside in the forest, Poland Spring water is actually sourced from wells in highly populated areas near potential sources of contamination. According to the lawsuit, the 6 groundwater collection sites that Nestlé uses for Poland Spring
are near a present or former human waste dump, landfill, fish hatchery, or toxic petroleum dump site.
Even the made-up names of Dasani and Aquafina, which don't mean anything in specific, are somewhat misleading. Both names were created based on the responses of consumer focus groups. For instance, Dasani was shown in focus groups to sound relaxing and suggesting pureness. The brand Aquafina gives a similar impression. In fact, in Italian it means fine water, and in Spanish it also sounds very much like that. Nestlé went ahead and simply named its brand Pure Life. These brand identities are specifically aimed at fooling and misleading consumers. However, you shouldn't expect regulators to step in and do something about it. No matter how gross the misinterpretation, companies have nothing to worry about. Why? American laws include almost no requirements for truth in branding. Therefore, for instance, you could get tap water from an industrial city, put it in a bottle, and sell it under the name of Glacier Iceland water, and you would not be doing anything illegal. The laws are made in a way that the commercial brand name, also called the identity of the brand, are beyond regulation. So while you cannot lie directly about the origin of the water, you can use whatever branding you like, even if it's misleading. In other words, following the example from before, you could get tap water from home and sell it under the name of Glacier Iceland water, but you couldn't lie in the label and literally say this water comes from a glacier in Iceland. Beyond names, origin, and brands, there is another important issue that bottled water brands try to hide. While all bottled water brands try to claim superior health benefits and taste over tap water, that's not really the case. In 2017, a blind taste test was organized to compare tap water with premium water brands like Fiji Water, Evian, and Smart Water. 30 people tasted 7 different types of water. What were the results? Filtered tap water outranked Fiji Water and Evian, which are marketed as high-quality water. This comes to show that the preference for bottled water is related to the power of marketing. It's not a matter of taste as such. However, it's not only about taste. We also have to cover the differences between tap water and bottled water in terms of the health impacts. While companies that sell bottled water often claim that it has health benefits, that's not really the case. In 2006, after Fiji Water published an advertisement that said the label says Fiji because it's not bottled in Cleveland, public authorities of Cleveland decided to test the water. They found over 6 micrograms of arsenic per liter in the Fiji bottle, and none in Cleveland's tap water. Needless to say, Cleveland's tap water is hundreds of times cheaper than Fiji water. Another huge problem is microplastics. There is growing evidence that plastic bottles slowly leach tiny plastic particles in the water, which in the long run can have negative impacts for your health. In 2018, a study of 259 water bottles purchased in 9 separate countries showed that 93% of them contain microplastics. Fiji Water, for instance, is now facing a lawsuit over the quality of its water. The lawsuit, introduced in 2024, alleges that the company falsely advertises Fiji Water as a healthy and pristine water, when in reality it contains microplastics. Therefore, the company has been accused of fraud and unjust enrichment. Poland Spring and Evian have also been sued. What is really in the water bottles we buy? We may assume that it comes from the place from which the brand gets its name, but we don't have evidence about it. We assume certain things, but we rarely actually know what kind of water it is, what are its properties, or where does it come from. We might assume that it is clean and safe to drink, but we don't know how it was treated or who tested it. Labels of water bottles, particularly in the United States, are minimal at best and misleading at worst. Often, the branding of a product suggests a pristine water spring, but the water is simply municipal tap water that you might as well drink for a tiny fraction of the price. In many countries, tap water is actually more regulated and better quality than bottled water. Peter Clegg, a scientist who has researched the bottled water industry for years, said the following:
More stringent rules about bottled water labels would require honest information on where the water comes from, how it has been treated or processed, and where the consumer can go to get up-to-date and independent information on water quality.
However, research by the Environmental Working Group showed that 18% of bottled water brands give zero information about where the water comes from, and 32% didn't provide any information about the treatment procedures followed or water purity. Research by Peter Clegg finds that about 45% of bottled water brands in the US are simply selling tap water in a bottle. So instead of spending money on bottled tap water, why not simply drink tap water for free? Instead of falling for the allure of exotic and pristine images on the labels of bottled water, we should focus on investing in safe tap water systems, public water fountains, and reusable bottles, solutions that are cheaper, sustainable, and more reasonable.